Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. So we have many, many topics to discuss tonight. Is there any particular one that you would like to start with?
Well, I think I'd like to start with his death,
Sure.
just to clarify what really happened for him. Because there's been lots of articles out about the possible piano wire. It actually was a rubber hose catheter that was wrapped twice around his neck and tied in a knot. And supposedly he just sat on the edge of his bed and died from a suicide. But he always said in his lectures and to me personally that if they ever said he committed suicide, you'll know he was murdered. And
Right.
certainly that's what happened.
Absolutely. There's an interesting story that you and I have been talking for the last couple of days. I got in touch with you the other day, and it was just so awesome to be able to reach out to you and you'd agree to come on the show because so many people out there, like myself, who are just, we believe everything that Phil has said. And the incident that you had told us about how he was discovered and the initial report that was given, did you want to elaborate a little bit on what the initial report was given and how it came to be that this catheter tube was found?
Yes, I was called late one night on the 17th of January in 1996, and I was told that he had died of a stroke and that he was, deceased and had been that way for almost a week. I made arrangements with a funeral director to take his body from Woodburn, Oregon, which is where he was living, to Portland, Oregon, where I was living. And later, the next day, I went to the funeral director and I said I wanted to see the body just to kind of make sure he didn't have a gunshot wound to the head or something, because his life had been threatened and he was talking about top government secrets. Well, the funeral director said he knew the coroner and he knew that the body would be okay, but he would check it for me. He didn't want me to have to look at it because it was decomposed a little bit there. The next day, the police called me and said his body had been taken to the medical examiner, that the funeral director had found something around his neck. The coroner had never gone to see him. Now, in Oregon, if you die at home, your body has to be examined by the coroner or his assistant, and that was never done. So that was the first clue right there that something was really wrong with his death. Later,
Okay.
the medical, yeah.
Also, to reiterate here, you had told me that he was, there was allegations that there was a woman going to his apartment where he was living and was giving him shots for MS.
Right. In Oregon, we had a special experimental program for multiple sclerosis, and Philip had been diagnosed with that, along with a multiple number of other problems that were going on for him. But in specific, that one. So he told me he was in an experimental program with the Oregon Health Sciences here in Portland, Oregon, and a nurse came in and gave him a shot every week for the multiple sclerosis experimental drug. And sometimes he would call me and he would say, I really can't see Marie, his daughter, this week because the shot made him so sick. Well, after his death, I wanted to get all the medical paperwork. I went to his personal doctor, and I went to the University of Oregon's hospital, and they said he was never in their program. So he was being given shots. Yeah, he was being given shots by a nurse that was a fake. This was not an authorized program.
So they had no record whatsoever of any of their nurses on their staff going to give this experimental shot to Phil.
That's correct.
So we have
So
no
he
idea
was
who this woman
basically,
was.
right, and I think this is the same woman that was involved with his death later on, and also that we saw after his death during when we were all together discussing his death at a church. We looked out the window and there was this woman in the car with long blonde hair, and I'm pretty sure it was the same person that had been involved with giving him the shots.
My goodness, that's just, there's so many subjects that I don't even know where to start. I know that one of the big ones, if you don't mind switching gears here real quick, to go back, so some of our listeners may not have a full knowledge of who Phil was and what he was contracted to do, what kind of work he did, and some of the things that he discovered while he was working he was a civilian contractor for the government. He was a structural engineer. He was a brilliant man.
Yes, he
that
was
knew a lot
very
about.
brilliant.
I mean, he had a vast knowledge.
Yeah, he was working for Morrison Knudsen, which is a company, I believe they're stationed in Idaho. And he did a lot of work with that company doing military work. So he wasn't in the military, but he was involved with the military because he was a contractor. And he was doing deep underground mountain bases. Now, he was an explosives expert, so he knew what was needed in order to get through certain rocks so that they could build these bases. And some of them were 2 miles deep. So we're talking, a lot of explosives, a lot of work getting down into a certain area and then enlarging it it's like a city down there. One of the examples that he talked to me about was in Colorado, where he went down into granite. And so they're blasting down into granite, and suddenly they came to a cavity that shouldn't have been there. So they went down to explore what was going on, what this cavity was, and it turned out to have in it a UFO and an alien body. Now, this had occurred so long ago that there was actually like quartz that had formed over the ship and the alien's body. This was the first clue that he had that aliens had been here living in the earth for probably millions of years. When we think about being invaded by aliens, forget it. They're already here and they have been here. They've been a part of our life since the beginning. The second time he told me...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The second time he told me about the alien contact was through the deep underground mountain bases was the Dulce, New Mexico.
Right, the Dulce firefight.
Right, the firefight. And he told me about that, how the men came down. And to me, the number was like 21 people originally went down. They're blasting holes, and suddenly they discover that there's a cavern already there. So they go down and explore what's going on there. And they find lizard aliens, Dracos is what he would call them. So they're big, tall, reptilian-looking, and they also had some of the gray, what they call grays. They're the smaller, shorter, with the big eyes, the kind that you usually see in the people who have been abducted.
Right.
The typical gray, right. He told me about how some of them are very allergic to ammonia, and they would actually pee in their hard hat and throw the pee on the alien, and it would kill them because they were very allergic to ammonia. I had some theories about...
Oh, go ahead, honey, go ahead.
Well, I had some theories about some of our mythologies, like vampires, that they're allergic to garlic. You wear garlic around you. Well, garlic forms ammonia. And to me, I think some of our own myths in the past are really based on the blood-eating aliens that he found in these caverns. They had a big vat of blood and human body parts. And they were actually,
about that.
yeah, they're consuming humans.
So there was actually human body parts down in the Dulce firefight, and as that story goes, to the best of my knowledge, he had a gun and shot 2 of them. Is that correct?
Well, he got shot by a cobalt gun from one of the aliens, and I believe he had a gun as well, but the major damage was to him in his chest.
Right.
And he had a very severe injury where it would split open, especially when he was warm during the summer. And while he was married to me, he had that repaired. He had that injury repaired.
What is a cobalt gun?
Well, it was like a laser, I guess, being shot by a laser. So it was a very thin line, and it went right into his chest. It hurt his lung. I believe he had only half a lung on one side.
So
in one of his... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, in one of his videos, he would pull up his shirt and show the injury to his chest, and that was from the firefight.
I have to apologize. There's a delay on my end, so I have to apologize for that. Now, did he actually see them eating, like, human body parts? I mean, like, because I had never really heard that graphic part of it. I had heard that in one of his speeches he did say that they base their food on our adrenal glands. And,
yeah, they derive one of their happy drugs from us. So when they frighten us and we get the adrenaline going, yeah, that's like a drug to them. But then they eat our blood.
Really?
Yeah, they eat it. Yeah, they want our blood, and they eat our body parts. There was this big giant bat.
Certain ones.
Well, it sounded like the reptilian ones specifically were doing this, and the Greys help them get people. So the Greys help abduct people, usually children. There's 1 million children that disappear every year in the United States. 1 million every year. But we only hear about a couple of them. And if you were to map out where children disappear in the United States, they're almost always around where the deep underground mountain bases are. And they're housing these reptilians now. There's a treaty that we have to house them in exchange for their technology.
Right. Did he mention anything else about anything he knew about these extraterrestrials? Now, the underground bases, the holes that they were digging, what were they digging these holes for? Was this was to expand military bases, but the extraterrestrials just happened to be already living there, or?
Right. The extraterrestrials happen to be already living there because they've been living on Earth forever. But the deep underground mountain bases originally were to protect people in case of, like, Noah's flood or something happening to the surface, like an atomic bomb and a nuclear winter. So originally these deep underground mountain bases were to protect certain people underground so that if the Earth became inhabitable on top, they could still live below it. Plus, they have a transportation system in between the deep underground mountain bases. He knew where 152 of these bases were, and they're all connected by an extremely fast system of mobility. You could go from New York to L.A., I think you said, in an hour through these underground systems.
I remember hearing about that in one of his speeches, about the Mach 4, I think he said they went, or something.
Yeah, they're very fast, and they're all underground. He visually saw one of these when he was underground in one of these bases. He saw the system, but he didn't write on it.
Right. The only thing I've heard that was mentioned in one of his speeches was that there was shackles on these underground systems that he saw on these trains.
Okay.
For people who he believed weren't going along with the New World Order when it would take place, were going to be enslaved. To the best of my knowledge, in one of his videos, that's what he said. That's just amazing. He had all this information because you just think about the number of, government officials or civilian workers working for our military and our government doing these secret things who aren't telling anybody about what's happening and what's going on. And it's just, really sad how many of us, are naive and don't know what's going on right under our noses here and where our money's going, which would probably explain why gas prices are so high and that's where the money's going.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me clarify.
Go ahead.
I would like to clarify about the freight cars because they're actually above ground. They're not below ground. And they're made by Gunderson Freights, which is actually here in Portland. We have the freight cars are being made here in Portland, Oregon. Apparently one of the employees, got really concerned by what he was seeing. And when you look inside the cars, they have like 122 pairs of shackles inside of them.
Oh, okay.
And he took a photo of it. And because he knew Philip was lecturing all over the nation, he gave Philip the photo and told him about what was going on. Plus, it's kind of local for us because he was from Portland and Woodburn. It's very close. These would be used for the internment camps. So if you go to the New World Order, you're going to have people who don't want it, right? And so they have these internment camps, and these shackled freight cars will take the people to the internment camps.
Oh, that's just chilling to hear things like that our, own government would do that to us.
I think what was most amazing about that story is after the Oklahoma bombing, they were blaming the militants for doing the bombing, and they asked to go to the Senate and talk in front of the Senate and tell them what type of organization they are, the militants. At the very opening up, and I saw this on the news personally, they showed a photo of one of these freight cars and asked the Senate what it was. The Senate immediately closed down. They told all the people to go away. And that hearing was no more. Later in the paper, this happened after the Oklahoma bombing when the militants wanted to have a hearing in front of the Senate. So they made public the freight car photo, and you know where they got it from, was Philip.
Right.
Because they wanted people to know, that a lot of things that are happening are really addressed toward a one-world government.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of what Phil touched on in his speeches. It's just so remarkable. Another subject, if you wouldn't mind talking about a different subject right now, I want to get as much in as possible about things that he knew, is the Philadelphia experiment. Now, his father, to the best of my knowledge from what we discussed, was working on that program. Is that correct?
Yes, he was. His father was Captain Oscar Schneider of the Navy. He was a medical doctor. So what happened with the Philadelphia experiment, Einstein and Tesla got together. They formed a machine that would vibrate the air, the water, sound, everything together, and they were attempting to make a Navy ship invisible to radar. But what they ended up doing was making a ship invisible to sight. On top of that, the ship could go from the Philadelphia harbor where the experiment started to Newark, New Jersey in like 5 minutes. So there was some sort of a time warp
Wow.
involved. When it reappeared, everything seemed okay. They turned on the machine again, went back to the Philadelphia harbor, and at that point, it reappeared. Men were like impaled in the ship. They were phasing in and out. I mean, this was the reality. It's not just a science fiction show. It really did happen. All the men were quarantined into a psychiatric ward in Virginia, the ones that survived. Obviously, the ones that were impaled in the ship didn't survive. When these men died, Dr. Oscar would come in and autopsy their bodies. And this is some of the letters that Philip found after his father became deceased, were these letters that his father wrote saying, what is this that I'm finding inside their bodies? It's behind their eyes, in their brain, in their arms and their legs, and it was a tiny little gold-tipped transmitter-looking thing, very tiny, with Enochian type writing on it. And it was an alien implant. I mean, we would know it as that now because we've seen so many of them. Back then, it was a new thing. And so the theory is that the Philadelphia experiment got caught in with some alien interaction, and that's why when it came back that second time, it was all impaled. Excuse me.
Oh, that's okay. I remember hearing about that show. I think it was, oh gosh, I can't even remember what show that was, probably on the History Channel or somewhere, but I do remember hearing about that. That's a very famous incident, and I can't believe that Phil's father was involved with that. That's absolutely just stunning. And then to hear of his own account, and I know, you've told me several things about strange coincidences in your family regarding, your line, and I won't bring any of it up. I'll let you talk about it if you want to talk about it.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the Operation Crossroads, because that was another experiment, Black Ops, that Oscar Schneider was involved with. So again, he's a doctor with the Navy. He's there at the Bikini Atoll with what's called Operation Crossroads, and they actually set off 2 different atomic bombs. There were ships. I mean, it's amazing how many times I see this on TV. You'll see the atomic bomb go off, and in the water you'll see these little tiny ships. Well, those are, Navy ships that were in the experiment. They had goats and different kinds of animals on them, and after the bomb went off, Oscar would go on these ships and look at the animals and see what the radiation did to them. But in the meantime, when they set off that first bomb, photographs were taken at the top of it, and UFOs were coming up out of that Bikini Lagoon. So you had the mushroom cloud, the UFOs coming up out, and water dripping off of them. They were coming up out of the water. Now, the head of this experiment was General Joseph Stilwell, and I got a book on the Operation Crossroads. I was very interested in it, and it suddenly dawned on me that a young boy that my daughter had gone to school with was named Joseph Stilwell, and I thought to myself, wow, what's the coincidence in that? I'm going to call his grandfather who was raising him. So I called the grandfather, and I said, I'm looking at Operation Crossroads, the book, and I noticed there's a Joseph Stilwell, and your grandson is named that. Is he related? He goes, yes, General, Joseph Stilwell was my uncle. And
Wow.
my grandson, yeah, wow, and my grandson is named after him. And I said, well, yeah. So and he lives right here in Portland. So I said to him, well, my husband has some photographs from Operation Crossroads showing things coming up out of these clouds. And he says immediately, oh, you mean the UFOs? And I said, yes, the UFOs coming up out of the clouds. And he goes, yes, I was in the airplane that was taking the photographs, and I saw the UFOs coming up out of the Bikini Lagoon. So here was someone who, out of all the coincidences in life, his young grandson goes to school with my daughter, and both of our families are involved with Operation Crossroads. But here's a first-hand account, whereas Philip was just using the photographs, and he was totally right. I mean, there was a base, underground base of some sort for the aliens there in the lagoon.
It makes you wonder about where just coincidence ends and fate, destiny, or whatever else picks up, I mean, some things are just too coincidental, and, when you start to connect everything, it makes you really just step back and take a look at the big picture like, wow, what am I to be seeing here? What am I to be getting out of this whole situation, with trying to push for disclosure. And I know, unfortunately, after Phil passed away, all we had to go by was the videos that are up on YouTube and whatever speeches were made. And I thought, my gosh, it's been so long, this story not be swept under the rug. There's just too much information that needs to get out there. And I'm just really grateful that you're on the show and you're able to corroborate things that Phil talked about and give a first-hand account of, your life with Phil and the things that he talked about and the things he experienced and things that you experienced and, the strange things that happened.
I mean, I saw the original letters. I saw the original photographs with the Navy SEALs on it. They stamped their photographs a certain way. This was not fake stuff. This was real stuff. And all of that was taken. When he died, and I went into the apartment after his death, his higher math books, his notes that he was writing for his book, all the photographs, all the alien materials, everything was gone. Now his wallet, his jewelry, his money, I mean, things that most people think of as valuable was still there, untouched. Except his wallet was kind of a weird thing, but that's another story. It's just that the police go, oh, well, somebody stole photos, huh? They stole what? What?
They don't understand. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're just making it up. Why would they steal that stuff and leave all this other stuff here? It wasn't a burglary. It wasn't a murder. It was just a suicide. And I know it wasn't.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know better, and, there's so many corroborating things that, the catheter around his neck and the things missing from the apartment, yet money was left, and, and the mysterious woman going to the apartment, and then you also had what you referred to as a watcher that lived across the street from you the entire time.
Oh, yeah. So when Philip first moved into my home, I had a longtime neighbor across the street. I mean, she'd lived there for decades, and all of a sudden she's moving out and a new person moved in. So it's exactly the same time that Philip is moving in, she's moving in. So this is 1987. In 1996, when Philip died, I'm at his funeral. I'm visiting with people who've come from all over, from Canada, Georgia, Washington, and she's moving out at the very same day of the funeral because she didn't need to be there anymore. But that was a watcher. That was someone who was designated to be there to see what me and Philip were both doing, our movements.
Did she have any family with her? Did you notice any visitors or children or anybody else?
No, I never noticed anything.
Did you ever talk to her?
I just talked with her a little bit just to say hello. Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm your neighbor. And, kind of what happened to the other neighbor. I was kind of curious why she had to move.
Did she say why?
Well, she said, she had a fire and her family decided she needed to go live on her own. I mean, live in a assisted living place. She shouldn't be living on her own anymore.
Was there anything that was suspicious about this woman other than the fact that her timing was just really bizarre? Did she have an accent, or did you notice anything that might indicate she, was really maybe from a foreign country, or did she seem physically fit? Like, was there anything that just didn't really fit the bill of, a woman like her living there alone all them years?
Yeah, I just didn't have a whole lot of contact with her, but I know, again, the serendipity, the coincidences, and I knew another person who had a watcher as well. He was a lawnmower man. He could send his electrical impulses through TVs, through telephones, through computers, and basically spy on you on the other end.
A guy could?
Yes, right. I don't know if you've ever seen The Lawnmower Man. Again, it's a science fiction show, but I actually physically knew someone that could do that.
Oh, the truth is stranger than fiction.
Yes. I don't know why I'm kind of I draw interesting people to me, I guess. But Philip, he was such a brilliant man. He could figure out mathematically that the Challenger was shot out of the air. That thing did not blow up because of an O-ring. It was shot out of the atmosphere he said it was a cosmosphere that shot the Challenger out of the air. But it was because it had the first non-military person on it. If you remember the teacher. Yeah.
What was you going to say, hon?
I forget the name of the teacher that was on the Challenger that day, but that's why it was shot out of the air.
Yeah, offhand I wouldn't know. I'd have to look that up. But, I mean, if anybody would know, he would know, definitely. I mean, he, like you said, his wealth of knowledge and things like that, people like ordinary people who don't have the education with, like, the mathematics and, what he knew about explosives, he definitely was at a higher education level than most people, I would say. And that gave him an advantage, that a wealth of knowledge, that power of knowledge.
Yeah, and also he talked about the Oklahoma bombing when you talk about explosives and him knowing what caused what. He said that the Oklahoma bombing was a military explosive in one of the elevators. There actually had been 2 bombs, one on each side, that, how usually you have 2 elevators opposite each other, right? So the bomb went off in one, but it didn't go off in the other. And if you can recall, when they were coming in to try and rescue people, they suddenly all started to run away because they said there was another bomb that they found. They really had found another bomb. It was in the other elevator, but it hadn't gone off. But he could tell by the U-shaped explosion, the way the building looked, that this was not just a car bomb on the outside of the building. He could tell it was in the elevator.
Did he say why they would have done that? What the motive was behind it?
Yes, because the very next day they were going to release all the papers from Waco.